I run marketing over at Cloud Elements. We're an API integration platform. I'm not going to really tell you anything about our business, but if you would like to talk to me a little bit about that afterwards, I'd be more than happy to. It's been almost 7 years since this famous statement was written. And I think, over the past 7 years, it's interesting how the market has evolved. One of the things that I think highlights the fact that software is very much eating the world is the world of APIs. Over, again, the past 6 or 7 years, we've seen a massive, almost exponential increase in the number of public APIs, a trend that's continuing, maybe starting to slow slightly, but ultimately a trend that continues today. And I think, what we're talking about in this session is this notion of products versus platforms. And the world of APIs, I think, was the first step. It was the enabling layer. It was the beginnings of this story as we start to think about a platform strategy. Ultimately, though, I would suggest that simply having an API isn't enough. There aren't enough developers in the world to care about the number of APIs that exist today. And so your API strategy alone isn't enough for you to consider yourselves a platform or that your organization has developed a platform strategy. We've actually seen even some very well-known large service providers that offer APIs today have limited or in some cases no adoption of their APIs. And when large, and I'm talking about financial services companies, other large organizations, if they can't get their APIs adopted, then it's hard for smaller, lesser-known product companies to drive adoption and drive awareness. Ultimately, I think one of the problems here is that the integration needs to be made easier. Matt talked a little bit about this earlier, that the world of integration needs to be made easier. We should think of it as a product, he said. And I agree fundamentally with that. Integration has become a problem, though, that's not just for developers. It's about providing integration capabilities to as many people as possible. It's for everyone. And so in order to be a platform, you need to be able to offer new, better experiences on top of your APIs. Ultimately, this whole session is about how and where a platform strategy should be adopted. First of all, what is a platform? The basics, I guess, we should cover. This definition basically says a digital platform enables other businesses to connect with, I would say actually integrate with, not connect, integrate with your business in order to derive value. So the combination of your product and somebody else's product starts to create this sort of platform. So we have the what. What about the why piece? I think this is perhaps way more important. Platforms ultimately deliver far more value and utility than a standalone product. You want to be able to enable business users by providing the integration fabric that connects them together. Provide that enabling layer that brings people together. And you also, as I said already, need to think beyond the world of developers. We heard earlier this notion of consumerization in enterprise. Absolutely. I've used a slightly different word, but the same basic principle holds true. Democratizing the world of integration, making it available to everybody rather than just the few, is really the fundamentals of why platforms are useful, and a platform strategy specifically is useful. The other thing, though, is that platforms ultimately are allowing us to deliver a different way of doing business, right? We're moving past this notion of a single-sided business model, which has sort of very constrained limits around growth and your sort of go-to-market strategy, and thinking in broader terms, right? We're looking at these sort of three key sides to a multi-sided business model. Enabling other businesses to build products on your technology, using third integration to create stickiness, adhesion between your product and your customers and the other products that your customers use. And of course, not forgetting that like side one of the triangle, right? You have to be able to deliver direct value as well. I'm going to quickly look at a couple of examples. The first one won't shock you. Every single speaker, I think, has used this example so far. and it's because I think Slack is the most obvious. When we think of a platform, it is the most obvious one that comes to mind. When you think about the experience that you have with this platform, it stands out as being best in class because they have made it as easy as possible to integrate to all of the other things that you use. So their platform strategy really falls nicely in the notion that we're talking about, making it easier, democratize the world of integration, think beyond just having an API. There are lots of others. I'm not going to go into any details here, but Salesforce, Intercom, another platform example I like. People are probably familiar with this company. A couple of Irishmen started this. And Twilio, a communications company that I think everybody is well familiar with. I like this one too because these guys, their product is an API. And so they've built their platform strategy on top of their API, which is the foundation of the business. So why then is this platform strategy appealing? I think the title of this presentation was the 4 superpowers of the network economy and why that matters, why those superpowers matter in your platform strategy. I'm going to introduce the notion of those 4 superpowers in a second. But again, since we kind of covered the definition of a platform, I think we should just take a minute and look at the definition or what it is, sort of leverage the network economy. This is, I guess, the byproduct of becoming a platform, right? The network economy and the network effects around your business is the result you're after. That is the whole point of doing it. This is the reason why organizations like Slack or Twilio or Intercom go to the trouble of building a platform and going to market in that multi-sided approach. So what features of the network economy then are important? These are the superpowers as we've defined them. In fact, this actually comes from some research from Faber Novel, so I can't take all of the credit. But these are the 4 things that I think are interesting. Magnetic, infinite, real-time, and infinite and intimate. Those things, even I confused myself there. So those are the 4 we're going to cover real quick in this network economy. So the first, magnetic. This is about really understanding the value inside of your organization. Right? You want to be able to find the data, the business logic, whatever other capabilities and features and value that exist inside your organization, turning that into something that other people can leverage in order to drive, combined benefit. Those 2 things, the smallest value components in your organization, along with the value components in somebody else's, come together in this network effect. And ultimately, you can kind of think of this in a world of integration, right? This magnetism is really what we think of when we talk about integration, making it easier for things to come together and stay together. And if you think about how this works in a standard economy, companies basically take a single input and have a single output. In a network economy, you have the ability to take every one of those discrete units of value and redistribute them so that both producers and consumers can come together and leverage the value of that. This is kind of fundamental. This is I think the foundation of why a platform strategy in the network economy is actually beneficial. The next is infinite. This is really about removing the limitations of the single-sided business model, right? As you think about evolving into a platform strategy, being infinite is what is where the value exists. That's but also about knowing where your limits exist, where the power of the network can derive more value than the power of you individually. Know the limits of where you lie and where the benefits of your partners come in. Ultimately, the advantage here is leveraging the expertise of those around you. The notion that a rising tide floats all boats or ships or one of those things. And again, in this world, in a standard economy, their growth is kind of constrained by their capacity, by the marginal cost of production. And in a network economy, they can start to serve additional customers or in new markets or engage in new ways with virtually no additional cost. That again is understanding where the end of your value, where it stops and where the value of your partners in the broader network continues. Number 3 is real-time. So real-time is really about reacting to change, or at least that's how I'm interpreting it in this particular case. I think there's always change, and it's how you react to that change as the ecosystem around you or your customers' needs continue to evolve or fluctuate. That's really what real-time means, I think, in the notion of the network economy. And here, if you think about the advantage of operating in a real-time fashion, it's that first mover advantage. It's what Wayne Gretzky used to say, is skate to where the puck is going to be. That is where you need to be, operating in real time. How many times was the Wayne Gretzky reference used during this conference? First time. Oh, really? Right, yeah. So again, in a real-time world, there is again a difference between the standard economy and a networked economy. The standard economy, companies produce products to the market maybe once or twice a year, and that's their go-to-market strategy. And in a network economy, they're really leveraging the binding forces. This is if we think about the iterative approach to product development, but then think about the broader platform strategy, how you can use the adhesion, the magnetism of the network economy in order to actually get new things to market by leveraging that magnetic effect. The final fourth superpower is intimate. And I think this might be one of the most important ones, actually. Ultimately, in a network economy, intimate organizations are about adapting and personalizing their service to different personas. I think what we've seen is that differentiation exists where you can deliver a more personalized experience to customers and reaching as many different segments of customers potentially or individuals as possible. So that's a key competitive advantage. If we think about standard versus network again in this model, companies in the standard world produce and sell an identical product to everybody. But in the network economy, they offer tailored products, customization. Again, this creates a stickier relationship with customers and a longer lasting relationship. We're going to talk about some of the hows in a little bit, and I think longevity is certainly one of the things that you have to consider as a business today. So how do we actually create this thing? I was a little worried that if I just did these 4 things, this would just seem a little abstract. So we'll talk a little bit more about the details now, how we actually create this network effect with some maybe more tangible thoughts. I think Kevin Kelly actually said this best, though. I'm not going to read all of this, but ultimately, openness is the foundation. That's where it starts, right? The hermetically sealed environments can't survive. You have to be more open. You have to think about how other people can interact with you in new ways. And so this, for me, is the foundation. Like I said at the beginning, having an API has really helped change the world, but it's not enough. Having an API on its own is not enough. And so whilst openness is the beginning, it really evolves from here. There's a book I like, The Platform Evolution. This was, I think, published a couple of years ago. You'll be happy to know I'm not going to give you all 8 ways that are defined in this book, but I would recommend the book. It's really good. I've kind of boiled this down into 3 key things. Flexibility. I mentioned longevity already. We're going to cover that. And then, broadly speaking, integration. Those are the three things that I thought we would talk about. So, in the world of flexibility, this is about allowing a multitude of companies to leverage the platform in different ways. And they're often very different ways, allowing people to do new things that you never possibly imagined is kind of the beginnings of flexibility. And how you reach a broader audience and make your, opening the doors to a much wider market segment. If we think about the how piece, right, this is, how do we react to customer needs? How do you think, how do customers engage with your business today? If you have an API, do they get everything they need out of it? Even your internal product teams, do they get everything they need out of an API that you offer? Could you do better? Is it well documented? What level of burden are you putting on the customer or the user of your product, of your business, in order for them to see value? Is there more that you can do? We talked about the second one here at the very beginning, right? Enabling as many people as possible to get value out of your platform. Don't assume that your API, if we're talking about APIs as the foundation, don't assume that offers all of the utility that every possible persona could be asking for. There might be ways we need to personalize that, adapt the API, adapt the way we engage people that are trying to build on top of your platform. Should you have, pre-built things for developers or pre-built integrations for non-technical users? The answer is almost certainly yes. And then the third one, businesses need to serve the broader ecosystem. Technology is just one part, right? If we think about platform strategy, it's not just about the technology piece. Sure, that's important, but you have to consider what does success look like for users of your platform. Go beyond the basics of just making great technology for technology's sake. Consider how customers and partners are going to use it, and the value they're going to derive from it, and how you can equally benefit from the power of the network around you. The second is longevity. In the world of products, customers use them for some period of time and then kind of discard them and never come back. And this is happening increasingly, right? We kind of live in the moment. A product has solved a problem for us for a short period of time, but it has no longevity. And it's partly because we've got to this situation perhaps where we use so many products now, and they're very focused on a very specific thing. And if the need for that specific thing doesn't exist anymore, then the need for that product doesn't exist anymore. And that maybe is the opposite of a platform strategy then. Have I really thought about how I can expand beyond that single or very narrow focus? If the narrower the focus ultimately, I would say the less likely you're able to keep customers for the long term. Platforms, the sort of opposite of that, are kind of deeply integrated. They think about how they can span into other business processes. We talked about Xero just a few moments ago. Including the capabilities of Xero as a platform allows them to reach into the business processes of their customers and be a part of them. And that stickiness, that adhesion, is what really derives value. Of course, I'm not suggesting that we just stop moving, right? Longevity does not equal, stop. It means, let's think about, or that you remain static. It means think about, moving forward, responding to market forces. I like, a lot of the examples we've probably talked about here. If we, think of the marketing applications graphic that shows all of the MarTech companies in the ecosystem right now. I think that's an opportunity for those organizations to collaborate, to cross-pollinate was a word that we used in the last session. I think the same exists in the world of fintech, maybe evolving in the world of human capital. This notion of longevity means being able to do more with those around you. However, like, you have to think about delivering ongoing value. I think we all know the Constellation Research data that says 52% of the Fortune 500 have been merged, acquired, or gone bankrupt, or simply fallen off the list since the year 2000. 52%. It's probably more than that now. That was kind of an old stat. This is a trend that continues. It shows that digital disruption is real for sure, but it also shows that we have to think about value not just in technology, but how we sort of bring new business models are made possible through this platform effect, this network effect. And then the third is integration. I think integration is really the foundation. This is really the whole point of this whole presentation, is to talk about why integration is what makes your platform strategy either work or not work. This is where value really exists. Can a more integrated product reduce churn, for example? Can you charge more? Can you derive more value for your product if you have integration as a capability? Does it open up new ways of doing business? Does it enable that multi-sided business model if you offer integration? Does it make it easier to do business with you? I think one of the other things here, though, is that we have to leverage the power of the crowd, lean into the notion that there's power and utility in having customers and partners in the broader ecosystem engage with you. And that ultimately means making it as easy as possible for them to do that. Make it easy to do business with you. That is the foundation of a platform strategy. And then the final point on this slide is, just remember that platforms aren't just for developers. I think especially in the SaaS space, we talk about platforms as being this thing that developers build something on, and that's not the right way to think about it. Platforms are an approach to your business, not something that a code slinger cares about. And then I thought I would wrap up just by talking a little bit about the why. So whilst I describe the value and the why piece of platforms, you can think up some hard questions. Ultimately, I think there's one fundamental reason why a platform strategy is important, and it's quite simply growth. Again, borrowed from the same research as the four superpowers. If you look at classic growth versus the growth opportunity of a network business, of a platform, that's why people look towards a platform strategy in order to grow. We've seen this in our customer base. We know that there's a 60% reduction or potential reduction in churn for organizations that offer integration out of the box. If they provide that capability for their customers and their partners and their users to integrate around them, they can see as much as a 60% reduction. That is everything I was going to tell you today, so hopefully this was useful. I know that there's time for questions. Apologies for that massive version of me right there. I think we should skip backslide.
Yep. All right. Cool. Thanks. Thanks so much, Ross. Really appreciate that. Let's see. Anyone have questions that they have for Ross? I think I have one. I have a question. Early in the presentation, you were talking about how there are so many APIs, not enough developers, people aren't getting traction on their APIs. What's the one or two things a company should do to ensure that the API they're going to build is going to get some adoption?
Yeah. I don't know that there is one or two things. I think a successful API is about a combination of things, but the basics matter. Usability matters. documentation matters. How you engage with developers matters. It's about making it as easy as possible to do business with you. I think those that struggle are those that have gone a weird and wacky direction. Perhaps they've adhered too much to what the standards books tell them to do, and rather than best practices around usability. But again, there's no one or two silver bullets here. This is it's about making it as easy as possible to do business with you, and of course, your APIs can't be adopted if you put any barriers in front of people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Any other questions? No. All right, super. Let's give Ross a big round of applause.
You have a big picture back.